Hello and welcome to San Juan Bay Marina. This is David Fansler with Sailing It Solo. It is Saturday, December 31st. I have been here since Tuesday evening and been taking care of things. It's been very, very boring, so I haven't really recorded anything. And so anyway, everything is ready. I've paid my bill. I've gassed up the boat, or dieseled up the boat, and we are ready to head to North Carolina. This is the story of a boy who in his teens started selling sunfish. In his 30s, he sailed with a friend on his Catalina 27. In his 40s, he bought a Hobie 16, which he sailed every year at the beach for a week. Also in his 40s, he bought a Catalina 27, followed by a Morgan Out Island 41. He sailed the Morgan Out Island for more than 16,000 miles until his 60s when he sold it. He then bought a Hobie 21 SE, which kept him happy for a while, but then he bought a Beneteau 50.4, which he started sailing, and he's sailing it by himself. So sailing solo at 70 is me, David Fansler, only now I'm 71. Oops, make that 72. This is the T-Mobile Mall across the way from me. It was an open-air mall where the corridors between the stores was open to the skies above, and only the center of the mall had a cover over it. It had a rather large sound system stage, lots of places to eat, cinema, and other things as well. Well, it wasn't the prettiest leaving the dock ever, but I made it out. And now we got to go up here and thread through all these boats sitting up here. Fortunately, none of the cruise ships are here today, so that's a good thing. It is a beautiful day today. Temperature is in the upper 80s. Nice wind blowing. Let's see. Oh, about 10 knots. Where Dragonfire had been sitting while I was recuperating for 6 months. Well, that sucked. Well, with the old Fort of San Juan in the background, we are out in the ocean. Gentle swell rocking us back and forth. Doing about 5 knots and 11 knots of wind. Not the fastest speeds that we've had, but we're doing okay. The old fort, by the way, was used in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., an ABC production. And it was kind of a highlight at one point of the show. So anyway, moving on. Well, daylight on the first day after leaving Puerto Rico is finally falling, starting to get dark. Having supper, a couple of egg sandwiches with mayo and bread. I've been about 30 miles so far. I left at 1:30 and it is Whoa. It's 6:30. So that's 5 hours, so that's an average of about 6 knots. So that's not a bad start. Not much else to report on. Hadn't caught anything yet. It'll be nice. Anyhow, well, back to supper. I was fortunate that the moon was out and close to full as I started my trip from Puerto Rico to North Carolina. It was beautiful. And on the second day out, it rained. It's raining pretty good. Good wind blowing. We're heeling over. The rather primitive Well, if I'm not mistaken, that's a mahi-mahi. A good catch for a first fish. The sunsets I saw coming from Puerto Rico to North Carolina were absolutely beautiful. The orange haze coming off the sun was just stunning. The heavy red in this radar view is rain. I tried chasing it down a few times to wash the boat down, but never was successful. But this is what rain looks like on the radar when it's heavy. I think I see some rain. I do see some rain coming up behind me. It's an ugly little squall. The wind has died down to almost nothing, and it's coming. Well, the wind's down to 8.5 knots, and this storm just keeps getting closer and closer. It should be fun. Yeah. We'll see what happens. All right, the wind is down to 7 knots now, and this storm has gotten broader and broader as it's approaching. It should be fun. The first thing that will happen is the wind will start picking up. It'll be a cold wind too, and that's called the squall line. And then the rain will hit with a vengeance. The boat's starting to pick up speed, so I imagine the wind has started picking up. Let's see. So today's meal is fresh seared mahi-mahi, which I caught yesterday. And we've got a pan of hot olive oil. And then over here we've got our pieces of mahi-mahi. Let's see if we can reach in here and get some pieces out. Alright, that ought to be enough for one meal. It's popping like crazy. We'll let these cook up for another minute or so. Looking good. Flaky, falling apart on me. That piece is still a little raw on the inside. The motion you're seeing in the stove is the stove rocking as the boat rocks. The stove is always maintains a level position so your pan doesn't slide off. So we're rocking pretty good today. Let's see if we can stick our phone at the window here. And as you can see, we're rocking pretty good. Alright. I think my mahi-mahi is ready. So we're going to turn off the stove and plop these pieces on my fine paper plate. It smells delicious. All right, let's take a bite before we go up and see what it tastes like. Oh man. Oh man, that's good. That's real good. Yeah, baby. Well, good Wednesday afternoon. It's about 12:30 my time, 11:30 on the east coast of the United States. Left Puerto Rico on Saturday afternoon. Get out of there before the crazies went crazy for New Year's Eve. My understanding is that they have a good time in Puerto Rico on New Year's Eve. I didn't want to be there. Trip has gone smoothly. It's been very, very busy. I haven't recorded very much. And the primary reason is that most of it's been drudgery work. I've had a lot of things to deal with on the boat that don't quite understand what happened to it in the 6 months that I was gone away from it, but it just seems like it was a disaster. I had two of the outhaul lines on the, well, two of them are reefing lines for the mainsail, and then one is the outhaul for the mainsail. Two of them broke. Now, I have no explanation for that at all. One of them was a brand new line. The anchor was not working. I had to figure that one out, and eventually I got one part of it working, but not the other. Well, it would bring the anchor up, but it wouldn't let the anchor down. Eventually I figured that down to the contactor, which is a big relay that handles all the power going to the windlass. Fortunately, I had another one on board because I had a feeling that one was going bad. The bow thruster is still out of commission, and I don't know why yet. I haven't gotten to that one yet. Like I said, I fixed the windlass. I just threaded one of the outhaul lines through the boom. I mean, you have to thread this thing through the boom and somehow get it out, and it's been kind of a painless in the roughest to do. Let's see. I've done some cleaning, not a whole lot. I cleaned the floor of the cockpit. You can see there's not much down there between the slats and the floor. It was all grungy and blah with stuff, so I've gotten that cleaned. I've cleaned one of the bathrooms. I only have 3 left. 4 cabins and 1 main salon to clean. I have been fishing some, and in fact, let me show you my rig for fishing. I actually went out. I'm gonna turn this. Well, I tell you what. Before I tell you about that, you may hear the motor running. We have discovered that the solar cells do not produce enough power to fulfill the requirements of the autopilot in 24 hours. And on top of that, I got the refrigerator working, so that's added some more load to the batteries. So I have to run the engine about 6 hours a day to top the batteries on. Now the solar cells are doing good. It's just that they're not powerful enough. They don't put out enough power to totally fill the batteries up. So it's a losing battle. So one of the things Jeff and I have been discussing via text is how do we correct that? A windmill has been suggested, or a wind generator. Bigger and more solar panels is another suggestion. All right, so while I was in Puerto Rico, I went out and bought myself a true heavy sea fishing rod. I've got 80-pound test line on it. It goes out to a downrigger, which is out there somewhere, probably full of seaweed at this point. And I've got a silver spoon that I'm fishing with that was suggested to me. Get over here. And the thing that's good about this over what I was doing before with the hand line is that if a fish strikes the hand line, you don't know it unless you're paying attention to it. But with this, I've got the drag set so that if a fish strikes, you hear that. So then you know to come catch the little fishy, which I did a couple of days ago. I caught me a nice mahi-mahi, and I've eaten it on a couple of days. Ah, there it goes. That's probably seaweed. Let's see if I can see any. There's a lot of seaweed out here, and it's called Saragossa seaweed. Now, right now, I don't see any. And for some strange reason, this is called the Saragossa Sea. And I think they kind of go hand in hand with each other. The sea is probably running 5 to 6 feet today. It's not terrible. The wind's up around 14 knots. I'm making 6.5, pushing 7 knots. So it's been a good day. So I guess I'll reel this thing in to see what's going on. Either get the seaweed off of it or bring the fish in. But I'm sure it's seaweed, so I'm not going to bring it in. Alright, so that's all that's going on right now, other than the electric windlass handle, and I'll talk about it later. Because I'm hungry and I'm going to go eat lunch. Well, here we are in the midst of the storm. As I predicted, I turned into it. We're getting the least effects of it, except where my rope came undone over here. There's just a little tension on the sails as we sail through this. We shouldn't be long. See, it's just raining like crazy. couldn't fix that one flap. I made my way up through the Turk and Caicos and into the Bahamas. I arrived there late at night, and the next morning I moved to this location. It was just a little bit deeper than the boat itself, and I stayed there for until 9:30 that night and decided, heck with this, I'm still ready to go home. So with the full moon out, I raised the anchor and headed off toward Jacksonville, Florida. But to get to Jacksonville, I first had to pass Freeport, the Bahamas. And this is a couple of shots of Freeport as I sailed by that night. Mary found a marina for me to stay at there in Jacksonville. They had told her they had quite the ship store. I don't know. This is a picture of it. They had looked like 5 shirts and 3 candy bars. The reason I stopped in Jacksonville was to wait for some heavy weather that was blowing up the East Coast to pass on by. It turned out that it had not finished blowing by when I left 2 days later. For the next 3 days, the wind was sustained at 35 knots with gusts blowing up to 48 knots. It was quite a ride. I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't have wanted anybody else to have been on the boat with me. This was early in the return from Jacksonville to Wilmington, North Carolina, before the wind really started reaching its stride at 35 knots sustained. During the trip back from Puerto Rico, the bow navigation light started playing games with me. It would fade down to a dimness that other ships couldn't see. In fact, I had one ship contact me and stated they found me on radar, but couldn't see my navigation lights. I eventually decided to fix it permanently and went up front and took the cover off the light and removed the light bulb, used some sandpaper to clean the contacts out, and then placed the bulb back into the fixture and put the red-green cover back on the bulb. This did fix the problem. It didn't blink out on me anymore during the trip. Might have noticed how I was holding on tightly to the boat as I walked up to the bow. This is because the waves were running, as I said, about 6 feet. And the 2 parts of the boat that move the most are the bow and the top of the mast. The bow hitting the waves tends to go up and down a lot. The stern of the boat tends to go up and down much less than the bow. And of course, the top of the mast being the furthest point from the water, when the boat swings back and forth, the top of the mast will go through a rather large arc. noticed that my clothes have changed a little bit since I left Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, the temperature was in the upper 80s, so shorts and short sleeve shirts were called for. As I approached the Bahamas, I could tell that the temperature was starting to drop. After I left the Bahamas and was headed toward Jacksonville, it dropped further. And after I left Jacksonville and the wind was whipping, it really got cool. You'll see a picture later on of me wearing much more clothing than I was before. Shit. You know, the thing about being alone, well, alone, by yourself, sailing this far for this long, gives you a lot of time to think about choices you've made in life, people that you've wronged, how you would have done it differently, people that have wronged you, and how would you handle those situations differently. Like I said, being alone for so long definitely gives you a perspective on how you may handle things differently. Those people that have wronged you all these years, bullied you in high school. Revenge is a dish best served cold, says Khan. Oh, what the heck, I'm too old for any of that. What's done is done. What people have done, they've done. What you've done, what I've done, it's done. Nothing's going to change. I think one of the things that affected me the most in high school that I was very, very attuned to when I was teaching school was bullying. And make no mistake about it, I was bullied. I was probably one of the smallest members of my high school class. I had neighbors that bullied me, band members that bullied me. And I really don't know why. I wasn't that smart in high school, or at least I didn't act very smart in high school. I didn't do drugs, I didn't drink. Maybe I was seen as goody two-shoes. You just don't know. What's really funny is that half the people that were serious bullies in high school, they're all dead now. I wonder if there's a correlation. And those that are left, I wonder if they even realized. Well, at least I know one guy knew what he was doing. A neighbor that lived down the street. So for 3 days after I left Jacksonville, Florida, I sailed northward under 35 knot sustained wind with gusts from 45 to 48 knots with nothing more than a partial reefed Genoa. It was actually a wonderful trip. I would not have wanted anybody with me that is not used to sailing. It had probably scared them to death. I made Winston-Salem late in the evening. Actually, I made the Cape Fear River late in the evening and dropped the anchor outside of Southport, North Carolina, and then motored on up to Wilmington the next morning. I forgot to tell you, I've only got about half of the Genoa out. The mainsail is still down, and I'm doing about 4 knots in all this mess. So, journey ho! So with the boat safely docked, my wife picked up her pirate husband, who turned out to be a nice guy after all. And such was the end of the journey from Puerto Rico to North Carolina.